رمضان تجلى وابتسم طوبى للعبد إذا اغتنم.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. To the listeners, we are busy discussing the different aspects of making tawbah on the big and the last big nights of the month of Ramadan. Thus far we discussed the aspect of making tawbah with regards to our rise to Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We now come to the next part of our tawbah. This tawbah refers to and is in respect to the rights of fellow beings. These rights that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed upon us are not just rights which are just social and business rights or business dealing rights which are just governed by the law of the land or by the law of our society. These rights and laws have been divinely revealed by Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to us via Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So these rights are not just rights that are restricted to the world. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it obligatory upon us, and these rights will be questioned about when we will rise before Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yesterday we spoke about going back home. In our akhirat, these rights are going to be questioned to us by Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the rights that we have between us and fellow beings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed upon us two kinds of rights with fellow beings. One is the right of mu'amalat and dealings, and the other is the right of mu'ashara, our social interaction. It is a very sad truth that many people, many of us, don't regard these two branches, these two groups of rights that we owe in dealings and rights that we owe to one another as part of deen. Unfortunately, when it comes to ibadat, then we are very active. When it comes to salat, tasbih, hajj, umrah, nafil umrahs, etc., we are quite ahead of it. We are quite ahead in fulfilling it. When it comes to charity and sadaqat, we are quite zealous to carry it out. But in these two departments of deen, which form 40% of our deen, unfortunately, many of us, illa masha'Allah, besides those who Allah Ta'ala grants His divine protection and tawfiq and assistance, many of us are neglectful in it. We will first start with regards to the rights of mu'amalat and dealings. Almighty Allah, we must realize that in this world, Allah Ta'ala has created an interdependency system. Each one of us is dependent on the next for a comfortable life. There is no human who can claim that he or she is independent totally from the help, assistance, and needs of the next. For example, we find in our daily life, there is no person just like who can say that he is independent from the wealth or the commodity of the next. If it's a customer, he is dependent on the commodity of the seller. If it's a seller, he is dependent on the money of the customer. If it's one that does the work of hiring, then he is dependent on the one that will lease from him. And the one that's leasing is dependent on the lessor, etc., etc., etc. So these rights of dealings, likewise, in our homes, a simple example is like our home helper. The helper at home, just as much as we feel that she is dependent on a salary and wage, likewise we are also dependent on her services for comfort in our life. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created this interdependency system, and these rights have been put to us by Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And on these rights, Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will question us. This is a necessary part of our tawbah, that when we are making tawbah on these Mubarak nights, we need to introspect and see that what shortcomings have I with regard to the next in my dealings. If I'm one that has hired the service of a person, am I accurate in my dealings with her? Am I fulfilling her rights? Many a time we find that we commit mistakes that we are oblivious of. And I will just mention a few, just by way of example, so we can think. Many a time we hire a person to do a work. The hours of work are not even stipulated, and the person is forced to work even beyond the time of work just for our comfort. At the end of the month, we feel that we're doing her a favor by giving her salary. Whereas in Islam, the laws of hiring are not just given unfettered, without any strings, without any conditions. There are many laws of Islam with regards to hiring someone's services. The hours of work have to be determined. The type of work has to be determined. The allocation of work has to be determined. If any person works beyond that, then he is deserving of a fee. He's deserving of a remuneration. Inshallah, we will continue on the discussion in our next program. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
زمان البركات رمضان زمان الحسنات